The space station was alive with sound, color, and movement. Merchants shouted in strange tongues, selling glowing fruits, sharp weapons, and crystals that hummed softly. Strange creatures moved between the stalls, each with different shapes, wings, or glowing eyes. It was a place where hundreds of worlds met, a place where noise never stopped. But in the middle of this busy crowd, something terrible happened. A small alien child screamed, a sharp and desperate cry that cut through the marketplace. Two tall figures with dark armor grabbed the child and dragged him into the shadows. His small hands scratched at the floor, his glowing eyes wide with fear. The scream should have stopped everything. The merchants should have paused, the guards should have rushed, the crowd should have acted, but no one moved. The market continued as if nothing had happened. Merchants kept shouting, creatures kept walking, guards looked away as if their ears were closed. Only one man stopped, a human traveler, new to this station, stood frozen as he watched the child vanish into the dark alley. His name was not important yet, but his heart was. He felt the sound of that cry burn deep inside him. It was the sound of someone begging for help, the sound of pure fear. The human looked around, expecting others to react. "Didn't you hear that?" he asked a nearby merchant. The alien's eyes shifted nervously. "It is not your problem, human. Keep walking." Another passerby muttered, "The law does not protect them, interfere. And you will suffer." Still another whispered, "It is better to stay silent, better to survive." The human clenched his fists. Back on Earth, in old stories, humans had always told tales of heroes who protected the weak. He thought of children on his home planet, safe and laughing. He imagined what it would feel like if one of them had been dragged away and no one cared. He could almost hear the echo of the cry, fading but not gone. It haunted him, refusing to leave his mind. The crowd pushed forward, pulling him back into the flow of the market, but his feet refused to move. He could not forget, he could not pretend it never happened. For a long moment, he stood alone in the crowd, a single figure who still cared. His jaw tightened, his chest heavy with a decision he was not yet ready to admit. The alien sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the market floor. Lights flickered on, glowing signs humming in strange colors, but for the human, the world had already changed. This was not just a market anymore, it was a test of what he would choose to do. Would he be silent, like the rest, or would he risk everything for a child that was not even his own species? He closed his eyes for a second, listening again. In his mind, the cry still echoed. He knew then that he could not walk away, because to walk away would mean becoming like them, silent, blind, afraid, and that was something he could never be. The crowd flowed around him like water, ignoring him, but deep in the shadows of the station, danger was waiting. The child's kidnappers were already moving far from the market, and the human was about to follow. He did not know yet what enemies he would face, he did not know the law would turn against him, but in that moment, only one truth mattered: he would not ignore the cry. The human walked away from the market, but his mind did not leave the child's cry. Every corner of the space station was busy, glowing with strange lights and alien sounds, yet inside him there was only silence, silence filled with anger, silence filled with the question, why did no one care? He stopped near a food stall, where steam rose from a pot of glowing blue soup. The merchant, a tall insect-like alien with shining wings, noticed his troubled face. "You should forget what you saw," the alien whispered. "For your own safety, human, do not follow that path." The human turned sharply. "A child was taken, doesn't that matter to anyone?" The merchant looked away, his wings trembling. "It happens every day. They take the weak, the poor, the forgotten. No one fights them. The syndicate owns this place." The word syndicate repeated in his head like a dark drum. Even strangers feared to say it too loudly. They were not just kidnappers, they were something bigger, an empire of fear. He bought nothing from the stall, his appetite gone. Instead, he walked through the winding paths of the station, each step heavier than the last. He kept thinking of the child's small glowing eyes, the way they begged for help. The memory felt like a knife pressing against his chest. Finally, he sat on a bench near a giant window, looking out at the endless stars. His reflection stared back at him, tired, human, out of place in this galaxy of strange beings. He thought of Earth, far away. He remembered old stories his grandmother used to tell, stories of humans who stood up even when the world was against them, heroes who refused to be silent. His heart wanted to follow those stories, but his mind reminded him of the danger. He was just one man, unarmed, in a station full of enemies. If the syndicate ruled here, then chasing them was the same as chasing death. The law itself had warned him, interfere, and you will suffer. Why risk his life for a child who wasn't even human? But then he imagined something else. He imagined walking away, pretending nothing had happened. He saw himself blending into the crowd, living with the silence, and he hated that picture. It felt wrong, like a betrayal, not just to the child, but to himself. The decision grew inside him slowly, like a flame refusing to die. He stood up, his fists tight at his sides. I will not be like them, he whispered. If no one else cares, then I will. He left the bench and began walking with purpose. The station was a maze, filled with twisting tunnels and glowing lifts, but he kept asking questions quietly. Every alien he spoke to flinched at the word syndicate. Most turned their backs, some muttered curses, others warned him again, but a few, very few, gave small hints, enough to trace a path. At last, an old alien beggar with hollow eyes whispered the truth. They took the child to the underlevels, below the market, beyond the neon signs. Do not go there, human, no one comes back. The human pressed a few coins into the beggar's hand. Thank you, he said softly, and turned toward the underlevels. The path was dark, each step echoing against metal walls above him. The noise of the market grew faint. Here, in the shadows, the air was colder, the light was weaker, replaced by flickering signs and dripping pipes. He moved carefully, listening. Strange whispers floated through the air. He thought he heard chains rattling, maybe even muffled cries. Every sound made his heart race faster, but his steps did not stop. At one point, he paused near a rusted doorway. Inside, he saw cages, small and broken. Empty now, but the marks on the floor told a story of many who had been trapped. He gritted his teeth, anger burning stronger than fear. Deeper still, he found a narrow tunnel lit by a single red lamp. The shadows stretched long and heavy. Somewhere ahead, voices echoed, low, cruel, laughing. The language was alien, but the tone was clear. Predators enjoying their power. He pressed himself against the wall, waiting, listening. The voices faded, moving deeper, leaving the tunnel almost silent. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each step felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were warning him to turn back. Then, in the silence, he heard it, a soft whimper, weak but real. His heart jumped. It was the child, hidden somewhere in the shadows, still alive, still waiting. The human's decision was now complete. There was no turning back, no more questions, no more outs. He would face the syndicate, face the law, face the whole galaxy if needed, but he would not leave that child in the dark. He whispered to himself, his voice steady, I will protect you, no matter what. And with that, he stepped deeper into the underlevels. Unseen eyes were already watching him. Heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. The hunters had noticed the human, and the game had just begun. The tunnel stretched before the human like the throat of a sleeping beast. The air was heavy, damp, and carried the bitter smell of rust and smoke. Somewhere deep inside, a faint echo of chains rattled, mixed with the sound of quiet sobs. Each step he took felt like stepping deeper into danger, but his heart pushed him forward. He moved slowly, his hands sliding along the cold wall. Red lights flickered above, throwing strange shadows across the floor. He kept listening, every sound making his muscles tighten. He knew the syndicate's men could appear at any moment. Still, he could not turn back. The child's cry was a rope pulling him deeper into the darkness. After a long walk, he reached a broken doorway. Inside, the room was filled with cages stacked against the walls. Some cages were empty, some carried broken chains, but one cage held a small figure curled in the corner, glowing eyes filled with fear. The alien child, weak and trembling. The human froze, his chest heavy with relief. The child was alive. He stepped closer, whispering softly, don't be afraid, I am here. The child lifted his head slowly, his small face pale and bruised. Why are you here? The child whispered, his voice shaking. No one ever comes. The words cut deep. The human knelt down, gripping the bars of the cage. I could not walk away, he said, his voice low and steady. You are not alone anymore. The child's eyes filled with tears, but before he could answer, heavy footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind. The human's blood ran cold. He looked around quickly. There was no time to open the cage, no weapon to hold. The shadows in the doorway thickened, and then three figures stepped inside. They were tall, armored, their faces hidden behind masks with glowing red lines. The syndicate's hunters. One of them laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Well, a human rat has wandered into our nest. Another leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. You should have kept your eyes closed, human, now you will learn what happens to those who care too much. The human stood tall, even though his heart pounded like thunder. He had no weapon, no shield, but he had courage and he would not show fear. The child comes with me, he said firmly, his voice echoing in the metal room. The hunters laughed louder, their steps circling him like predators. One of them struck the bars of the cage with his weapon, making the child cry out. See? The hunter hissed. The weak belong to us, the law itself agrees. Who are you to defy it? The human clenched his fists, his body ready for a fight. I am the one who will not look away, he answered. The first hunter charged, swinging a heavy rod. The human dodged quickly, the weapon smashing into the wall with a burst of sparks. Pain shot through his shoulder as another hunter struck him from behind. He stumbled but did not fall. He turned sharply, using the narrow space to his advantage, forcing them to trip over each other. The fight was brutal. Metal hit skin, fists met armor. Every strike against him burned, but every strike he gave back was fueled by anger and determination. The child watched from the cage, tears in his eyes, whispering, please don't stop, please don't give up. The human's strength grew with those words. He slammed one hunter's head against the wall, sparks flying from the broken mask. Another tried to pin him down, but the human twisted free and drove his elbow into the attacker's chest. The last one roared and raised his weapon. The human grabbed a broken metal pipe from the floor and blocked the strike, the sound ringing like thunder through the room. For a moment, silence filled the air. The hunters lay groaning on the floor, beaten but not dead. The human stood above them, chest heaving, sweat and blood mixing on his skin. The child stared at him with wide eyes, filled with something new, hope. He dropped the pipe and turned to the cage. His hands shook as he pulled at the lock, but it refused to break. The child whispered, They have the key. The human searched the fallen hunters quickly and found it, small and rusted. With trembling hands, he unlocked the cage. The door swung open with a loud creak. The child crawled out slowly, weak but free. He looked up at the human and whispered, Why would you risk everything for me? The human knelt down, placing a hand gently on the child's shoulder. Because no one else would, because you deserve to be saved. Before the moment could last, an alarm blared through the tunnels. Red lights flashed brighter, the floor trembling beneath them. The syndicate system had been triggered. More hunters were coming, dozens, maybe hundreds. The human lifted the child into his arms, holding him close. The child's small hands clutched his shirt tightly. The human's jaw set hard, his eyes sharp. There was no time to rest. The shadows ahead promised more danger, but also escape. He whispered, almost to himself, We're not done yet. We're only beginning. And then, with the child in his arms, he ran deeper into the shadows. The hunters stirred behind them, alarms howled above them. The galaxy itself seemed to close in, but the human did not look back, not once, because once you step into the shadows, the only way forward is through. The alarms screamed through the tunnels. Red lights flashed against the metal walls, turning shadows into sharp claws that reached for the human and the child. The air trembled with the sound of heavy boots rushing closer. The syndicate had been warned, and now the hunt was real. The human held the child close as he ran, his feet pounding against the floor. The tunnels twisted like a snake, splitting into paths that led deeper into the underlevels. Every turn carried danger, but standing still meant certain capture. Behind them, the groans of the beaten hunters rose into angry shouts. The syndicate would not let this insult pass. The child clung to him tightly, his small voice shaking. They will not stop. They will never stop. The human's jaw tightened. Then we will not stop either. Not until you are free. They reached a wide chamber where pipes dripped water into shallow pools. The sound echoed, making it hard to tell where the footsteps came from, but then shadows moved at the far end. 5 more hunters stepped out, weapons glowing with blue light, their armor heavier, their stance sharper. These were not guards, they were killers. Their leader raised a clawed hand and pointed at the human. Seize him, the child is ours. The human placed the child carefully behind a broken pipe. Stay low, don't move until I tell you, he whispered. The child's glowing eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded. The hunters advanced in a slow circle, their boots splashing in the water. The human's hands curled into fists, his body sore from the last fight, but his spirit unbroken. He grabbed a loose metal rod from the floor, the only weapon he had. One hunter lunged forward with a blade that crackled with energy. The human twisted aside, the blade cutting sparks from the wall. With a sharp strike, he slammed the rod into the hunter's mask, shattering it. The others roared and attacked together, the chamber filled with chaos, metal clashing, water splashing, shouts and growls echoing through the dark. The human fought like a cornered animal, each move desperate but precise. Pain flared across his arm as a blade sliced his skin. His ribs ached as a heavy boot kicked him back, but he rose again, swinging, striking, refusing to fall. The child peeked from behind the pipe, whispering, "Please don't fall. Please don't stop." His words gave the human strength. He remembered Earth again, the faces of children who laughed freely, the warmth of family. He thought of what would happen if no one stood for them. That thought became fire in his veins. With a roar, he slammed the rod into the ground, knocking one hunter off balance. He grabbed the fallen weapon and turned it against its owner. Blue light flashed as the blade sliced through armor. The hunter staggered, surprised at the human's will, but more. Footsteps thundered from the tunnels. Dozens more were coming. The leader stepped forward, taller and stronger than the rest, his armor black with silver marks, his mask carved like a skull. "You should have stayed silent, human," he hissed, his voice cold and sharp. "Now your death will teach others what happens when they defy us." The human stood his ground, chest heaving, blood dripping down his arm. He raised the stolen weapon, his voice steady. "Then let my death mean something, because I will never kneel to monsters like you." The leaders snarled and charged. Their clash shook the chamber, blade against blade, sparks showering the walls. The human fought with fury, every strike fueled by the promise he made to the child. But the leader was stronger, faster, each blow pushing him closer to defeat. Finally, the leader struck hard, knocking the weapon from the human's hand. It slid across the wet floor, far from reach. The leader raised his blade high, ready to strike the final blow. The child screamed, "No," his voice echoing through the chamber. The human's eyes locked on the boy, and in that moment, he found one last burst of strength. He lunged forward, grabbing the leader's wrist before the blade could fall. The two struggled, muscles straining, the blade trembling between them. The human's arms shook, but he refused to let go. With a roar, he twisted the wrist and slammed his head into the leader's mask. The mask cracked. The leader staggered back in shock. The human grabbed the weapon from the floor and slashed, cutting across the leader's chest. The leader fell to one knee, growling in rage. The hunters behind him froze, their confidence shaken. The human stood above him, chest burning, breath ragged, but still unbroken. He pointed the blade at them, his voice sharp, "Come closer, and you will fall like him." For a long moment, the chamber was silent. The hunters hesitated, looking at their fallen leader. Then, slowly, they stepped back into the shadows, melting away into the tunnels, not defeated, but waiting. The fight was not over, only delayed. The human dropped the blade, his body trembling from exhaustion. He turned to the child, who rushed forward and clung to him. You didn't leave me," the child whispered. The human placed a hand on his shoulder, forcing a small smile. "I told you, I will not leave you." But as they stood together, the alarm still screamed. The study on itself shook as more syndicate forces moved. The human knew this was only the beginning. The real war had just begun. He took the child's hand firmly. "Come," he said, his voice low but determined. "We have to move. They will come again, stronger." The child nodded, his eyes glowing with a new light, hope, fragile but alive. And so they stepped once more into the endless shadows, not knowing what waited ahead, but knowing they could no longer turn back. The alarms faded as the human and the child climbed higher through the underlevels. Their steps echoed in the empty tunnels, but the silence felt heavier than before. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound felt like a hunter waiting. The human's arm ached from wounds, his shirt torn, but he kept moving. The child walked beside him, small and weak, yet refusing to let go of his hand. When they finally reached an abandoned corridor above the underlevels, they stopped to rest. The child leaned against the wall, his chest rising fast. You could have left me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Others always leave. They pretend not to hear. They look away." The human crouched in front of him, meeting his glowing eyes. "I told you, I will not leave you," he said firmly. "But why?" the child asked again. "Why risk your life? You don't even know me." The human's voice softened. "Because someone has to. If everyone looks away, then nothing will ever change." The child stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe, even just a little, that maybe he was not alone, but outside their hiding place. The station was already changing. Whispers spread quickly across the markets and corridors. The story of a human who dared to fight the syndicate reached every corner. Some spoke with awe, calling him brave, others whispered in fear, saying he was foolish, and some cursed his name, warning that he had brought danger upon them all. The syndicate's anger spread even faster. Bounty notices flashed across screens, showing his face with words written in alien script: criminal, defier of law, price on his head. Any citizen who helped him would suffer the same punishment. The law was not on his side. The galaxy itself seemed to turn against him when the human stepped into a quiet street with the child at his side. Creature. A role he had not chosen, yet one he could not walk away from. But the peace did not last. Far above the ruins, lights flared in the sky as ships arrived. The syndicate had sent more hunters, and bounty seekers were already roaming the streets. The price on his head was enough to tempt even the desperate and the greedy. The human knew the night would not protect them for long, and he was right. Footsteps crunched against the broken ground outside. Whispers echoed through the cracks in the wall. They are here. The human and the child. Figures moved in the dark, their shadows sharp against the ruined walls. Bounty hunters, dozens of them, some with armor, some with claws, some with strange weapons, all of them drawn by the reward. The human stood quickly, pulling Ael behind him. His eyes scanned the ruins, searching for a way out, but there was no easy escape. They were surrounded, the circle tightening with every step. One hunter called out, his voice cruel, human. The price on your head is more than your life is worth. Hand over the child, and maybe we let you crawl away. The human's voice was steady, though his body ached from wounds. You will not take him, he said. The hunters laughed, weapons raised. You think you can fight us all? You are only one man. The human's grip on the broken metal rod in his hand tightened. I may be only one, he answered, his voice sharp as steel, but one is enough. The hunters closed in, their eyes burning with greed. The human stood ready, his body tired but his spirit unbroken. Beside him, Ael held his hand tightly, whispering, Protector, don't let go. The human did not let go, not of the child's hand, not of his choice. The world had already turned against him, the law had already marked him, but his heart was set, unshaken, and as the hunters prepared to strike, the human lifted his chin and whispered, If the galaxy hates me for standing, then let it hate, but I will not bow. The ruins shook with the sound of approaching battle. The price of defiance was heavy, but it was a price he had already chosen to pay. The ruins shook with footsteps. Dozens of bounty hunters moved in the dark, their weapons glowing faintly, their eyes hungry for the reward. The circle around the human and Ael grew tighter, shadows pressing in like a cage made of fear. The air smelled of smoke and metal, every second heavy with danger. The human stood tall, blood drying on his wounds, the broken rod still firm in his hand. Beside him, Ael clutched his arm, his small glowing eyes wide but determined. He whispered, Protector, don't let them take me. The human lowered his head slightly and answered, They will not. The first hunter stepped forward, his armor plated with spikes. He raised a blaster, aiming straight at the human's chest. The crowd of hunters waited, silent, their breaths caught, but before the shot was fired, the human moved. He grabbed a broken slab of stone and hurled it with all his strength. It smashed into the hunter's arm, knocking the blaster away. Chaos exploded. The hunters rushed in from every side, weapons flashing, voices shouting. The human swung the rod hard, blocking, striking, moving with desperate speed. Pain lit up his side as a blade cut deep, but he refused to fall. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Ael crawled behind the wall of rubble, his small hands trembling as he searched the ground for something, anything, that could help. The hunters laughed cruelly, circling like wolves. One sneered, Give up, human. The law is against you, the galaxy will not remember your name. The human spat blood, his eyes burning with fire. Then I will make them remember, he growled. He struck again and again, his arms screaming with pain. One hunter fell, another staggered back clutching his chest, but more pressed in, their numbers endless. The human's vision blurred, the ground swaying beneath him. Still, he refused to kneel. From the shadows, a larger figure stepped forward, the syndicate's true leader, taller than the rest, his armor black and edged with red, his mask carved into the shape of a beast. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Enough, bring him alive, let the galaxy see his punishment. The hunters obeyed, striking harder, forcing the human back. They caught his arms, slamming him to the ground. The rod slipped from his grasp, clattering into the dust. Ael cried out, trying to reach him, but a hunter held the child back. Let me go. Don't hurt him, the boy shouted, his voice breaking. The human's body shook with pain, but his spirit did not break. Even as the hunters pinned him down, he lifted his head and glared at the leader. You can chain my body, he said, his voice hoarse but steady, but you will never chain my choice. The leader stepped closer, raising a cruel weapon shaped like a spear. He turned to the crowd that had gathered beyond the ruins. Merchants, travelers, even guards had come to watch. The leader shouted, his voice echoing across the station, this is what happens to those who defy the order. He fought for a child that was not his, now he will die for it. The crowd was silent, their eyes lowered in fear. None moved, none spoke, only Ael's voice rang out, desperate and sharp, he is not wrong. You are the cowards. He is the only one who stood up. The hunters silenced him with a shove, but the words had already struck like sparks. The human smiled weakly through blood, his voice rising, you hear him. If you ignore one child today, tomorrow it will be your own. Stand with me. Break the silence. The crowd trembled, their eyes flickering between fear and doubt. For years, they had lived under the syndicate's rule, too afraid to resist, but now, seeing one broken man stand tall against an empire, something stirred inside them. A whisper spread, quiet at first, then louder, he is right. He fights for us too, why do we stay silent? Why do we let them take everything? The leader snarled, sensing the shift. He raised the spear above the human's chest, ready to strike the final blow. The hunters pressed the human down harder, holding him still. The child screamed, his voice tearing through the night, protector. The world seemed to freeze in that moment. The crowd stood at the edge of decision, fear pulling them back, hope pulling them forward. The human's heart pounded, his body weak but his spirit alive. He closed his eyes for a second, whispering, if this is the end, let it not be in silence. The spear glowed with deadly light, the leader's arms tensed. The crowd gasped, torn between fear and courage. And then, the scene cut like a blade. Hanging on the edge of destiny, the question remained, would the galaxy stay silent, or would it rise with him? The spear hovered above the human's chest, glowing with deadly light. The crowd held their breath, trapped between fear and choice. The syndicate leader's mask reflected the firelight, cold and merciless. His voice rang out, sharp as steel, let all of you see. This is the price of defiance. This is what happens when you stand against us. The hunters pressed the human to the ground, their claws digging into his arms. Pain shot through his body, his vision swam, yet his spirit still burned. His eyes searched for Ael, the child struggling against the grip of a hunter. Their gazes met, a silent promise passing between them, I will not let go. The spear began to fall, and then, something broke the silence. A single voice from the crowd, trembling but clear, enough. Heads turned, eyes widened. Another voice rose, stronger, he is right, we have been silent too long. The leader snarled, quiet, or you will share his fate. But the crowd did not quiet. The whispers spread, growing louder with each heartbeat. He fights for the child, he fights for all of us. Why do we kneel? We are many, they are few. Stand. Stand. The leader raised his spear again, furious, but before he could strike, a stone flew from the crowd, smashing against his mask. The hunters roared, spinning toward the people, but the crowd surged forward, no longer silent, no longer afraid. Merchants grabbed their tools, miners swung their heavy drills, others hurled broken scraps of metal. Voices rose into a storm, no more. No more silence. The hunters tried to push them back, but the tide was too strong. For every man who fell, two more stepped forward. The human felt the weight on his arms loosen as the hunters were forced to fight the crowd. He rolled to his feet, gasping, his body weak but his spirit blazing. Ael broke free from the grip of his captor and ran to him. The boy's small hands clutched his arm tightly. You're not alone anymore, Ael whispered. The human smiled faintly, his voice rough but steady. Neither are you. The battle filled the square. The crowd fought with fury, with years of anger finally unleashed. The syndicate hunters, trained and armed, were strong, but the people, united at last, were unstoppable. Chains of fear shattered in the fire of courage. The leader roared, his voice echoing, "You think this changes anything? I will crush you all." He charged at the human, spear raised. The human steadied himself, gripping the broken rod once more. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying. The human's body ached, but every strike was fueled by the voices of the crowd. Every shout of defiance gave him strength. At last, the human struck hard, knocking the spear from the leader's hands. It clattered to the ground, glowing dim. The leader staggered back, his mask cracked, his eyes burning with rage. The crowd surrounded him, voices rising like thunder. No more. No more rule of fear. The leader swung wildly, but it was too late. The people surged forward, their courage greater than his power. He was dragged down, his roar lost in the storm of voices. The syndicate's grip on the station shattered in that moment. The hunters fled, scattered by the force of the uprising. The alarms still blared, but now their sound felt different, not a warning of doom, but a signal of change. The human stood in the center of the chaos, bloodied and tired. Ael clung to him, his small glowing eyes shining with tears. "You did it. Protector, you stood." And they listened. The human looked at the crowd, at the hundreds of faces now burning with courage. He shook his head softly. "No, we did it. I only lit the fire. You carried it." The crowd gathered around him, voices softer now, filled with respect. One alien stepped forward, bowing low. "You showed us what we forgot, that silence is death, but courage gives life." Another raised his hand. "You are human, but tonight, you are more than that. You are our flame." The human's knees almost gave way, his body near breaking, but Ael supported him with surprising strength for someone so small. The boy's voice was steady, though his hands trembled. "You stood up when no one else would. Now, no one will ever be silent again." The station lights flickered as if the walls themselves felt the change. The shadow of the syndicate still lingered beyond, their power not fully gone, but the people had risen, and nothing could chain them again. The human looked at the stars beyond the cracked dome. He wondered if Earth could see him now, if the old stories could hear. He had not sought glory, not sought to be a hero. He had only answered a cry that no one else would, and that was enough. With the child at his side and the crowd united around him, the human walked forward into the dawn of a new day. The galaxy had tried to silence him, but instead, his defiance had become a flame that would burn across the stars. Not just a story of one human, but of every voice that dared to rise. The forgotten cry was no longer forgotten, it had become a roar, and in that roar, humanity's flame burned bright.